I'm Andrew Williams, the Senior Product Marketing Manager looking after the ecosystem at Mimecast. And I'm joined by David Willis, who's the Director of Tech Alliances from Netskope, and Dixon Stiers, who's a Solution Architect from Crowdstrike. And we're going to be talking about the challenges that our customers are facing across all of the digital channels that they operate in, the associated threats directed towards them, and the integration between our different organizations, and how this can go about protecting you and reducing your overall risk surface. I'm going to hand over to Dixon to start us off. And he's going to walk through some of the challenges their customers are facing in terms of malware and all of the associated risks.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Andrew. And today I really wanted to talk about this idea of an outmoded defense. Essentially, what our customers are seeing in their environments today is that the legacy solutions they have aren't doing enough to protect against new threats that we're seeing come from adversaries. And one of the main reasons why their old solutions are failing is because the whole industry has been kind of focused on this idea of malware. We're talking specifically about detecting that ransomware executable that someone's going to click on the Windows machine, right? So historically, malware protection is going to employ things like signature-based detection, algorithms, and matching executables to known malicious hashes. It's really resource intensive, and it's not to mention very brittle. Lots of things sneak through, and it's pretty easily bypassed. And so what we learned at CrowdStrike, what our customers saw, was that malware is very important. But if you detect malware, it does not mean that you're going to stop the whole breach. You really need to think about the idea of, would you rather stop malware or stop breaches? And so while the obvious answer is obviously both, it doesn't mean that you're going to stop a breach just by thinking like that. You have to employ solutions that are going to be able to go there, take a look at what's happening from different sorts of attack angles, and be able to use that information to protect you in the first place. If you're putting malware first, you might want to consider this. On a daily basis, we're seeing hundreds of potential attacks unfold. And the reality is that a huge fraction of those attacks don't even use malware. So even if you stopped 100% of the malware that might be affecting your organizations, you're still likely to fall short of preventing 100% of those breach attempts. And to make matters worse, we know that there's no real technology or company on the planet that can stop those detection rates, can actually stop everything from happening. The challenge becomes in the industry the deployment of these outmoded defenses, tools that don't talk to each other and weren't really written to deal with advanced threats. Malware is really still important in the industry, and we do need to take care of malware, but increasingly, sophistication and impactful breaches happen elsewhere. Insider threats, credential threats, social engineering. And the big thing about social engineering that we're relying on partners like Mimecast is we don't have visibility as a product into what kind of things are happening at the email layer. The great thing that we're using Mimecast for is being able to share different kinds of information from the email layer back into the endpoint layer so we can track that across the two solutions. It provides different visibility, and kind of the scenario is if you have different kinds of video cameras in your network, you're watching things in different places looking for malicious behavior, looking for things that are anomalous. And so the more of those sources you have working together, sharing information is what we're really trying to go for, so that you have a holistic defense using lots of different solutions together. And so how does CrowdStrike help with all this? All the EDR tool suites that we have. We're really sitting there on these endpoints and logging each and every network connection, file write, process open, all these different details paint a picture of how adversaries are moving through your networks. And the more that you know about that, the better you can not only protect about it, but also foresee the next step in that chain. If you're seeing certain things coming at the email layer, resolving to a known hash, some sort of a phishing attempt, we can take that knowledge, apply it to the endpoint layer, and then use that to investigate across the network, so that we're not only looking in one spot for people to come in, but it's looking in lots of different spots altogether, and that's painting a whole picture of what your environment looks like. All right, and another big avenue of attack that we see on our endpoint environments is that of the cloud. Cloud's a huge new tool for us. We see lots of new customers using tools like Office 365, GitHub to store files, access different kinds of files, and it's a big threat vector. So I wanted to pass it over to David Willis to talk a little bit more about threat landscape and CASB solutions.
Thanks, Dixon. Yes, as Netskope has been deploying our next-gen secure web gateway, we've been able to see all the various parts of the cloud complex that are being used not just for productivity, but by attackers. And so when you kind of dissect a typical cyber attack chain as of 2021, spear phishing remains the primary vector for people to initiate those attacks. One of the ways to do it is by basically getting people to use credentials or provide their credentials to a seemingly safe site, but is in fact a malicious site that is using the same complex. So it's a malicious OneDrive, but it is in OneDrive, right? So without the visibility to understand and differentiate that, this spear phishing attempt would probably result in a successful click leading into a OneDrive page. And that OneDrive page looks like it's from Microsoft because it is. And then they download a weaponized Excel file They go to a Google Drive with the dropper request, this Excel file. And again, if we could determine whether or not the Google Drive instance is the corporate instance or someone else's instance and have that visibility, we can reduce the attack surface. But without that, it looks like Google Drive. So the dropper request succeeds, malware is downloaded, reaches out to GitHub, grabs the configuration, and then is enabled to communicate with the command and control channel, which we're increasingly seeing collaboration tools like Teams and Slack being used. And then ultimately, what's the goal? Get the data out. So all of these components are using different pieces of the web. And sometimes it's malware, sometimes it's seemingly a innocuous request to a website. And these highly sophisticated attacks, you need this visibility across all these, the email, what's happening on the device, and what's happening in the cloud, to put it all together and block it in at least one of these locations to prevent the overall attack from being successful. Andrew, maybe you'd like to talk about the email piece.
Thank you, David. Email is still the primary entry point into most organizations. And one of the advantages around email is the wealth of information available. If you look at some of the key elements that we can derive from a single email coming into an organization, we have senders and recipients, malicious URLs that are contained within an email. Who are they trying to impersonate? And are they an executive or maybe someone within the admin department? We can map the email as it flows through in the organization, moves laterally between the internal users. And lastly, the key piece being malware. When malware is sent to an organization, an action is undertaken to block the threat. And this is what fuels the integrations between the three organizations, because we can share this insight to ensure that you are better protected. This means that an upstream attack coming in via a cloud surface, as mentioned by David, or malware coming into the endpoint, as mentioned by Dixon, are all blocked with the appropriate technologies and tool sets that are available within each of the underlying platforms. When the different technologies are combined, you are provided with a multi-channel threat prevention capability. But in a modern world, it's not just about threat prevention. It's also about how to get control over your data. And this is where I'm going to hand back to David to talk through the key pieces of the integration between the different vendors.
Absolutely. Now, we do see this as the power of three very unique lenses, viewpoints into the IT security stack complex that each have a piece of the puzzle. Where Mimecast is able to see that initial attack and then all the subsequent badness that would have happened if that user had clicked on a link or received or downloaded the attachments, right? CrowdStrike sees what's going on in the device and has all the connections in and out of that device. And then Netskope is seeing what's happening in the cloud from a cloud-to-cloud perspective, as well as documents being instantiated in the cloud, as well as all the web transactions that are going on. And by putting together our three unique views and sharing indicators of compromise that each one of us sees, we're actually able to essentially enhance the overall security stack, right? Because when you think about attacks, modern attacks, advanced threat that are persistent, they cost a lot of money to make. And so a bad person, an attacker, is going to spend $1 million and it's not going to work here. Are they going to give up? Absolutely not. They're going to make sure and go after other parts of the complex until they're successful. So by sharing all this information, what CrowdStrike was able to prevent, now that information can be leveraged by Netskope or by Mimecast and vice versa, so that whatever one knows, all know. And then ultimately, of course, the goal is, regardless of how this is occurring, we want to make sure data leakage prevention doesn't actually succeed. So be it malware, insider threat, compromised credentials, whatever the case may be, we want to make sure that the data that is sensitive to the organization is not ultimately leaked to the wrong people. And how do we do that? We do it by having an omni-channel, consistent approach with an enterprise DLP engine that says, I don't care how the data is trying to go out. If it's going out via email from Mimecast to Netskope or Netskope to Mimecast, I want to make sure that as that email leaves the complex, it doesn't contain sensitive information. If it's going to the cloud, it's going to the right cloud instance, and it doesn't contain sensitive information, et cetera, et cetera. By having this simple, straightforward, and globally applied DLP prevention policy, we're able to not only reduce the attack surface using the power of three, but prevent using any method, again, inadvertent or negligent behavior, that key data from getting out of our corporations. Back to you, Andrew.
Some of the key takeaways we'd like you to have from this video is when utilizing all products in conjunction with each other, you're reducing your risk surface with our combination of high fidelity security in near real time, ensuring that threats are blocked earlier in the detection stack. Through the omni-channel DLP capabilities means that your data is moving within your organization and potentially beyond your borders. The appropriate data is stopped from leaving. And this means you've got control in terms of the threats and data. If you want to find out more information, please navigate through to mimecast.com/tech-connect and look at the different integration information available from both Crowdstrike and Netskope. There is also a white paper available which speaks about the integration capabilities and the derived value that you can quickly and effectively obtain from utilizing all three vendors. And it is available upon mimecast.com. Lastly, if you wish to discuss any of these integrations in detail, please reach out to your account manager.